Odysseus turned his back on the harbour and followed a rough track leading through the woods and up to the hills, towards the place where Athena had told him he would meet the worthy swineherd, who, of all the servants Odysseus had acquired, had shown himself to be the most faithful steward of his property. Steward, goodness. He found him sitting in the porch of his hut, in the farmyard, whose high walls, perched on an eminence and protected by a clearing, enclosed a fine and spacious courtyard. The herdsman had made it himself for his absent master's swine, without help from his mistress or the aged Laertes, building the wall of quarried stone with a hedge of wild pear on top. Outside he had fenced the whole length on both sides with a closely set stockade made of split oak, which he had taken from the dark heart of the lochs. Inside the yard, to house the pigs at night, he had made 12 sties, all near one another, in each of which 50 brood sows were penned. That's a lot of pigs. And slept on the ground. The boars slept outside the yard, and of these there were far fewer, since their numbers were constantly reduced by the frequent banquets of the courting noblemen, for whom the swineherd used at regular intervals to send down the pick of his fatted hogs. There were 360 of them. They were guarded every night by 4 dogs as savage as wild beasts, trained by the master swineherd. He himself was busy shaping a pair of sandals to his feet, cutting them out of a piece of good brown leather. 3 of his men had gone in various directions with the pigs to their pastures. He had been obliged to send the 4th to town with a hog for the arrogant suitors to slaughter and feed on the flesh. Suddenly, the baying dogs caught sight of Odysseus and flew at him, barking loudly. He had the sense to sit down and drop his staff. Even so, he would have suffered ignominious injuries then and there at his own farm had the swineherd, had not the swineherd, letting the leather fall from his fingers, dashed through the gateway, shouted at the dogs and sent them scurrying off in all directions with a shower of stones. Oh, that's mean, but understandable. Then he addressed his master. "Old man, that was a narrow escape. The dogs would have almost torn you to pieces in a moment, and you would have given me the rough side of your tongue. As though the gods hadn't already given me enough pain and grief. Here I sit, yearning and mourning for the best of masters, and fattening his hogs for others to eat, while he himself, starving as like as not, is lost in foreign lands and tramping through strange towns, if indeed he is still alive and can see the light of day. But follow me, old man, let's go to my hut. When you have had all the bread and wine you want, you should tell me where you come from and what your troubles are." The good swineherd led the way to his hut, ushered Odysseus in, and invited him to sit down on some brushwood that he piled up for him and covered with the shaggy skin of a wild goat, large and thick, which served as his own mattress. Odysseus was delighted by this welcome and thanked him, saying, "My good host, may Zeus and the other gods grant you your dearest wish for receiving me so kindly." And you, Eumaeus, the swineherd, said in reply, "Stranger, it is not right for me to turn away any stranger, even one in a worse state than you are, for strangers and beggars all come in Zeus's name, and a gift from folk like us is none the less welcome for being small. Servants cannot make larger gifts when they are always in fear of their overbearing masters. I mean these new ones. As for my old master, the gods have set their faces against his return. He would have looked after me properly, and given me possessions, a cottage, and a bit of land, and a wife that any man would be glad to have, as a kind master does for a servant who has worked hard for him, and whose work heaven has prospered, as it prospers the job I toil at here. Yes, the king would have rewarded me well for this, had he grown old in Ithaca, but he is dead and gone, and I wish I could say the same of Helen and all her breed, for she has been the death of many a good man. Do you mean women? My master, you see, was one of those who went to Ilium, the land of horses, to fight the Trojans in Agamemnon's cause. The swineherd broke off, hitched up his tunic under his belt, and went out to the sties, where the young porkers were penned in batches. Porkers. He selected 2, carried them in, and slaughtered them both. Next, he singed them, chopped them up, and skewered the meat. When he had roasted it all, he served it up piping hot on the spits, set it in front of Odysseus, and sprinkled it with white barley meal. He then mixed some mellow wine in an olive wood bowl, took a seat facing his guest, and encouraged him to eat. "Stranger," he said, "do have some suckling pig, which is all we servants can offer you, for our fatted hogs are eaten up by the suitors, who have no fear of the wrath to come and no pity in their hearts. Yet the blessed gods don't like wicked acts. Justice and fair play are what they respect in men. Even bloodthirsty pirates, when they've raided a foreign coast and been allowed by Zeus to carry off some loot, are haunted by the fear of retribution as they make for home with their ships full of plunder. So these suitors must have somehow discovered, maybe through some heaven-sent rumour, that my master has come to a disastrous end, which explains why they will neither pay court to his widow in the regular way, nor go home and mind their own business, but sit there instead, at their ease, and eat up all his livelihood in this high-handed style. No scrimping or saving for them. For I tell you they slaughter beasts every single day and night that Zeus sends. Never just 1 or even 2 at a time. They draw and swill wine like water. My master, you see, was enormously rich. There wasn't a lord on the fertile mainland or in Ithaca itself to touch him. He's worth more than 20 others rolled into one. Let me give you some idea. On the mainland, 12 herds of cattle, as many flocks of sheep, and as many droves of pigs, and as many scattered herds of goats, all tended by hired labour or his own herdsmen. While here in Ithaca, 11 herds of goats graze up and down the coast with reliable men to look after them. And every one of these men has day by day to choose the best of his fatted goats and drive it in for the suitors. I too, who tend and keep these pigs, carefully pick out the best and send it down to them." While Eumaeus was talking, Odysseus eagerly ate the meat and drank the wine, avidly and in silence, but his brain was teeming with thoughts of what he would do to the suitors. When he had finished supper and felt satisfied, he filled the bowl he had been using and handed it to his host, brimful with wine. Eumaeus accepted with pleasure, and Odysseus now said to him with winged words, "Tell me, friend, who was the man who bought you with his wealth, this lord whom you describe as so exceedingly rich and powerful? You said he had lost his life in Agamemnon's cause. Tell me his name, describe him. I may find that I know him. Heaven knows whether I can tell you I've met him, but I've certainly roved all over the world. I just want an ego-stroking now." "Old friend," answered the master swineherd, "no wanderer who comes here and claims to bring news of Odysseus could convince his wife and son. Beggars in need of creature comforts find lying easy, and to tell a true tale is the last thing they want to do. Wherever a tramp comes to Ithaca, he goes straight to my mistress and tells a pack of lies. She welcomes him graciously and asks him every detail, point by point, while tears of distress stream down her cheeks, as is natural for a woman whose husband has met his end abroad. Even you yourself, old friend, would be quick enough to invent a tale as if someone gave you a cloak and tunic to put on. As for my master, he is dead and gone. The dogs and the birds of the air must by now have torn the flesh from his bones, or the fish have eaten him in the sea, and his bones lie there, on the shore with the sand piled high above them. Yes, that is how he met his end, and his death has meant nothing but grief for his friends, and for myself above all. For I shall never find so kind a master again, wherever I may go, not even if I return to my parents' house, where I was born and bred. And much as I grieve for them and long to be back in my own country and set eyes on them again, it is for the lost Odysseus that my heart aches and yearns. Even in his absence, I can hardly bring myself to mention his name. He cared for me and loved me dearly, but even though he is far away, I still call him my beloved master. Friend, said the patient, good Odysseus in reply, since you won't accept what I say, and since you have so little faith that you cannot believe he will ever return, I will not merely state that Odysseus is coming back. I will swear to it. Directly he comes and sets foot in his own house, I will claim the reward for the good news, and you can dress me in a fine new cloak and tunic. But till that moment, destitute as I am, I will accept nothing, for I loathe, like the gates of Hades, the man who is driven by poverty to lie. Other reasons are okay, but not poverty. I swear now by Zeus, before all other gods, and by the board of hospitality, and by the good Odysseus's hearth, which I am approaching, that everything will happen as I say. This very month Odysseus will be here. Between the waning of the old moon and the waxing of the new, he will come back to his home, and will punish all who dishonour his wife and his noble son. And you, Eumaeus, the swineherd, said in reply, Old friend, that reward I will never have to pay, nor will Odysseus ever come home again. Drink in peace, and let us turn to other matters. Don't remind me of my troubles, for I tell you my heart is wrung when anyone reminds me of my dear king. As for your oath, let's forget it. And may Odysseus still come home, as I pray he will, and as Penelope does, and old Laertes and godlike Telemachus. Ah, there's another cruel anxiety for me. Odysseus' son, Telemachus. The gods made him grow like a young sapling, and I had thought he would become as good a man in the world as his father, a fine-looking man, when suddenly some god, or perhaps man, deprived him of his wits, and he went off to holy Pylos on his father's trail, and now those lordly suitors are lying in ambush for him on his way home, hoping that godlike Arceisius's line may be wiped out of Ithaca, and the very name be forgotten. Well, we must leave him to his fate, whether they catch him or whether Zeus stretches out his hand to save him. But now, old friend, you must tell me about your own troubles. Tell me the truth. I want to know everything. Who are you, and where do you come from? What is your city? Who are your family? And since you certainly can't have come on foot, what kind of vessel brought you here? How did its crew come to land you in Ithaca? And who did they claim to be? The inventive Odysseus launched into his story. I will give you a true account of all you ask. It's probably not going to be true, though, is it? If only you and I had an endless supply of food and wine here in the hut, and so could eat in peace while the rest got on with the work, I would find it easy to talk to you for a whole year without coming to the end of my sorrows and all the hardships that the gods have made me endure. I am a native of the broad lands of Crete, and the son of a rich man. He had a number of other sons who were born and brought up in the house, but they were the lawful issues of his wife, whereas my mother was a concubine he had bought. In spite of this difference, my father, Castor, son of Hylax, put me on equal footing with his legitimate sons. The Cretans of his day respected and honoured him like a god for his good fortune, his riches, and his splendid children, but his time came and death bore him off to Hades' halls. His high-handed sons then split up the estate and cast lots for the shares, assigning to me a meagre pittance and a house to match. However, I won a wife for myself from a rich land-owning family on my own merits, for I was neither a fool nor a coward. Now it is all gone, yet I think you will still be able to see by the stubble what the harvest was like. Since then I have been overwhelmed by troubles, but in the old days Ares and Athene had endowed me generously with the daring that breaks the battle line, and when it came to planning an attack against the enemy, and I had picked my men for an ambush, my proud heart never had a foreboding of death, and I would leap out before all the rest and kill with my spear any enemy who was slower on his feet than I. That was the kind of man I was in battle, but I did not like work on the land, nor the domestic pursuits that make for a fine family of children. What I always loved was ships with oars and fighting and polished javelins and arrows, terrible things which make other people shudder. I suppose that my inclinations were all implanted in me by the gods, for different men find satisfaction in very different ways of earning a living. Anyhow, before the Achaean expedition ever set foot on the coasts of Troy, I had 9 times had my own command and led a well-found fleet against a foreign land. As a result, large quantities of loot fell into my hands. From this, I used to select what I liked, and a great deal more came my way by lot. In this way my estate increased rapidly, and my fellow countrymen soon learned both to fear and to respect me. The time came, however, when all-seeing Zeus devised the dreadful adventure which laid so many low, and they pressed me and the famous Eumaeus to lead our ships to Ilium. There was no way of avoiding it. Public opinion was too much for us. So for 9 years we Achaeans campaigned at Troy, and after sacking Priam's city in the 10th, we sailed for home, and our fleet was scattered by a god. But for my unhappy self, the inventive brain of Zeus was hatching more mischief. I had spent only a month in the delights of home life with my children, my wife, and my possessions, when the spirit moved me to fit out some ships and sail for Egypt with heroic companions. I got 9 vessels ready, and the crews were soon mustered. For 6 days my good men gave themselves up to festivity, and I provided beasts in plenty for their sacrifices and for their own table. On the 7th, we embarked and said goodbye to the broad fields of Crete, and sailed off with a fresh and favourable wind from the north, which made our going as easy as though we were sailing with the current. Not a single one of my ships came to harm. We sat there safe and well, while the wind and the steersman kept them on their course. On the 5th day we reached the great river of Egypt, and there in the Nile I anchored my curved ships. Then I ordered my good men to stay by the ships on guard, while I sent out some scouts to... While I sent out some scouts to reconnoitre from the heights. But carried away by their own violence, they went on a rampage and immediately began to plunder some of the fine Egyptian farms, carrying off the women and children and killing the men. The hue and cry soon reached the city, and the townsfolk, roused by the alarm, poured out at dawn. The whole place was filled with infantry and chariots and the glint of arms. Zeus, the Thunderer, struck abject panic into my party. Not a man had the spirit to stand and face the enemy, for we were threatened on all sides. They ended by cutting down a large part of my force with their sharp weapons and carrying off the survivors to work for them as slaves. As for myself, a sudden inspiration saved me, though I still wish I had faced my destiny and fallen there in Egypt, for trouble was in store for me. I quickly took off my fine helmet, let the shield drop from my shoulder, and threw away my spear. Then I ran up to the king's chariot and clasped and kissed his knees. Moved to pity, he spared my life, gave me a seat beside him, and so drove his weeping captive home. Many of his people, of course, were lusting for my blood and lunged at me with their ashwood spears, for they were thoroughly roused, but he kept them away for fear of offending Zeus, the stranger's god, whose wrath is aroused by deeds of cruelty. I passed several years in the country, and made a fortune among the Egyptians, who were generous to me, one and all. But in the course of the 8th I fell in with a rascally Phoenician, a thieving rogue, who had already done a deal of mischief in the world. I was persuaded by his plausible talk to join him in a voyage to Phoenicia, where he had a house and estate, and there I stayed with him for a whole year. But when the days and months had mounted up, and a second year began its round of seasons, he put me on board a ship bound for Libya, on the pretext of wanting my help with the cargo he was carrying, but really to sell me for a handsome sum when he got there. Full of suspicions, but having no choice, I followed him on board. With a good stiff breeze from the north, the ship took the central route, south of Crete. But Zeus had planned their destruction. When we had passed Crete, and no other land nor anything but sky and water was to be seen, he brought a dark cloud to rest above the ship. The sea below it was blackened. Zeus thundered, and in the same moment struck the vessel with lightning. The whole ship reeled to the blow of his bolt, and was filled with the smell of sulphur. Okay, so he's kind of drawing on his own experiences here. The men were flung overboard, and round the black hull they floated like seagulls on the waves. There was no home coming for them. The gods saw to that. But in this hour of my affliction, Zeus himself thrust into my arms the great mast of the blue-prowed ship. Okay, he's actually telling the truth here, to allow me once again to avoid disaster. I coiled myself around it, and became the sport of the accursed winds. For 9 days I drifted, and on the 10th night, in pitch darkness, a great roller washed me up on the coast of Thesprotia, where Lord Phaedon, king of the Thesprotians, gave me hospitality, asking for nothing in return. His own son found me fainting from exposure and exhaustion, pulled me up by the hand, and took me home with him to his father's palace, where he gave me a cloak and tunic to wear. It was there I heard of Odysseus. The king had told me that he had entertained and befriended him on his homeward way, and showed me what a fortune in copper, gold, and wrought iron Odysseus had amassed. The amount of treasure stored up for him there in the king's house would keep a man and his heirs to the 10th generation. He added that Odysseus had gone to Dodona to learn the will of Zeus from the great oak tree that is sacred to the god, and to discover how he ought to approach his own rich land of Ithaca after so long an absence, openly or in disguise. Moreover, he swore in my presence over a drink offering in his own house that a ship was waiting on the beach, with a crew standing by to convey Odysseus to his own country. But he sent me off before him, because a Thesprotian ship happened to be starting for the corn island of Delicium. He told its crew to treat me well and take me to Acastus, the king. The crew, however, saw fit to hatch a wicked plot against me, to plunge me deeper still into misery. When the ship on her journey had left land far behind, they set about their scheme to reduce me to slavery. They stripped me of my own cloak and tunic, and replaced them with a filthy set of clothes, the very rags, in fact, which you see before you now. They arrived in Ithaca when the fields lay under a clear evening. They lashed me down tightly under the ship's benches with a strong rope, disembarked, and hastily took their supper on the beach. But the gods found no difficulty in untying my knots for me. I wrapped my rags round my head, slipped down the smooth landing plank, quietly breasted the water, and struck out with both hands. Very soon I was out of the sea and beyond their reach. I then made my way inland to a thicket of flowering shrubs and crouched down in hiding. They searched around for me with a great deal of shouting, but soon decided that nothing was to be gained by prolonging their search, and so climbed on board their ship once more. The gods made it quite easy for me to remain unseen, and ended by guiding my steps to the home of a man of understanding. So then I am not yet meant to die. And you, Eumaeus the swineherd, said in reply, "My poor friend, You have certainly touched my heart with the story of your hardships and wanderings. It is when you come to Odysseus that you go wrong. To my way of thinking, you won't get me to believe that. What call is there for a man like you to tell such pointless lies? As though I didn't know all about my master's disappearance, and how the gods showed their utter hatred of him by allowing him neither to fall in battle against the Trojans, nor to die in his friends' arms when all the fighting was over. Had he done so, the whole Achaean nation would have joined in building him a mound, and he would have left a great name for his son to inherit. But there was to be no glorious end for him. The storm fiends had spirited him away. As for myself, I am a hermit here with my pigs, and never go down to the town, except perhaps when news has arrived from somewhere, and the wise Penelope invites me. On such occasions everyone gathers round the newcomer, and plies him with questions, whether they are those who are pining for their long-lost king, or those who have the satisfaction of eating for nothing at his expense. But I personally have lost all interest in such probing and questioning, since the day when a fellow from Aetolia deceived me with his tale. He had killed a man, and after being pursued all over the world found his way to my door. I received him kindly, and he told me that he had seen Odysseus with Idomeneus in Crete, repairing the damage his fleet had suffered in a gale. He said Odysseus would be back, either in the summer or by the autumn, bringing back a fortune and his gallant company. Now a god has brought you to my door, my long-suffering friend. But don't you try to gratify or soothe my heart with any falsehoods. It is not for that reason that I shall respect and entertain you, but because I fear Zeus, the patron of strangers, and pity you. But the cunning Odysseus persisted. You certainly have a very suspicious nature, he said. If not, even my oath can bring you round and convince you of the truth. Come, let us make a bargain, with the gods of Olympus as witnesses to us both. If your master comes back to this house, you shall give me a cloak and tunic to wear, and send me on to Dulichium, where I want to go. If, on the other hand, your master does not return as I say he will, you shall tell your men to throw me over a precipice, just to teach the next beggar not to tell lies. Yes, cried the honest swineherd, and what fame and fortune I would win for myself in the world, once and for all, if, after taking you into my hut and showing you hospitality, I was to rob you of your precious life. I would be a willing party to a crime against Zeus, son of Cronos, if I did that. However, it's supper time, and I hope my men will be in before long, so that we can prepare a tasty meal in the hut. As they were speaking, the herdsmen came up with their pigs. The men drove the animals in batches into their sties to sleep, and the air was filled with the grunting of pigs settling down for the night. The worthy swineherd called out to his men, "Bring your best hog, I want to slaughter it for a guest I have here from abroad, and we'll enjoy ourselves after all we've put up with looking after the white-tusked boars all this time, while other people live for nothing off our work." He then chopped some firewood with his sharp axe, and his men dragged in a fatted 5-year-old hog, and held it by the hearth. The swineherd, who was a good and virtuous man, did not forget the immortals, but began the ritual by throwing a tuft of hair from the white-tusked victim into the fire, and praying to all the gods that the wise Odysseus might come back to his home. Then he drew himself up and struck the animal with a piece of oak which he had left unsplit. The hog fell stunned. They slit its throat, singed its bristles, and deftly cut up the carcass. The swineherd cut pieces from all the limbs as a first offering to the gods, placed them with raw fat on the thigh bone, sprinkled them with barley meal, and threw them all onto the flames. Then they chopped up the rest of the meat, pierced it with spits, roasted it thoroughly, and after drawing it off the spits, heaped it up on platters. The swineherd, with his characteristic fairness, stood up to divide it into helpings. He carved and sorted it all out into 7 portions, one of which he set aside with a prayer for the nymphs and for Hermes, Eumaeus' son, and distributed the rest to the company. But he gave Odysseus the portion of honour, the hog's long chine. This courtesy warmed the heart of his master, who turned to him and said, Eumaeus, I hope Father Zeus will look on you as kindly as I do for picking out the best portion for a man like me. And you, Eumaeus the swineherd, said in reply, Do start, my strange guest, and enjoy such food as we can offer. The god will give, and the god will take away, according to his will, for he can do everything. But then he made a burnt offering to the immortal gods of the piece he had set aside, and after making a libation of sparkling wine, handed the cup to Odysseus, the sacker of cities, and sat down to his own portion. They were served with bread by Mesaulius. They were served with bread by Mesaulius, a servant whom Eumaeus had procured for himself during his master's absence, acting without help from his mistress or the old Laertes, and buying the man from the Taphians with his own resources. All began to eat the good food spread before them, and when they had satisfied their hunger and thirst, Mesaulius cleared away the food. Sated by now with bread and meat, they began to prepare for bed. Night came, bringing foul weather. There was no moon. Rain from Zeus set in for the night, and the wet west wind blew hard. Odysseus now spoke to them, intending to put the swineherd to the test and see whether, out of his obvious concern for his guest, he would take off his cloak and lend it to him, or persuade one of his men to do so. Listen to me, said Eumaeus, and all of you. I am going to boast and tell you a story. This is the effect of wine. It makes people do crazy things. It sets the wisest man singing and giggling stupidly. It lures him on to the dance, and it makes him blurt out what's better left unsaid. However, since I've opened my mouth, I might as well go on. I wish I were still as young and strong as I was when we led that surprise attack against Troy. Odysseus and Menelaus, son of Atreus, were the leaders, and at their request I went in with them as a third in command. When we came up to the frowning city walls, we lay down, crouching under our armour in the dense undergrowth of the marshland reeds. The north wind dropped, and a cruel frosty night set in. From overhead the snow came down like hoarfrost, bitterly cold, and the ice formed thick on our shields. All the rest had cloaks and tunics, and they slept in comfort with their shields drawn up over their shoulders. But when I started out, I had foolishly left my cloak with my men, thinking I wouldn't be cold, and so I joined the party with nothing but my shield and a bright waistband. In the third watch of the night, when the stars had passed their zenith, I had a word with Odysseus, who was my neighbour. I nudged him with my elbow. He was all attention. Son of Laertes, favourite of Zeus, inventive Odysseus, I'd said. I shall be a dead man soon. This cold is killing me because I've got no cloak. A god tricked me into coming with nothing but a tunic, and now there's no way out of my plight. When I put this to him, Odysseus turned it over in his mind, and, like the schemer and soldier that he was, he had an idea, as you will see. Quiet, he whispered in my ear. Don't let any of the others hear you. Then he raised his head on his elbow and called to the rest. Wake up, my friends. The gods have sent me a dream in my sleep. We have come too far from the ships, and I want someone to take a message to Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief, to ask if he will send us reinforcements from the base. A man called Thoas, Adraemon's son, immediately jumped up, threw off his purple cloak, and ran off towards the ships, leaving me to snuggle down in his cloak with a grateful heart till dawn appeared on her golden throne. I wish I were still as young and strong as I was then. And then you, Eumaeus the swineherd, said in reply, Old friend, that is an excellent story you have told us. Not a word was ill-judged or lost on us. Tonight you shan't go without clothing or anything else that an unfortunate outcast has the right to expect from those he approaches, but in the morning you'll have to wrap up in your own rags once more. We have no stock of cloaks here, or change of tunics. Each man has to manage with a single cloak. But when Odysseus's dear son arrives, he will give you a cloak and a tunic to wear, and send you wherever you have set your heart on going." The swineherd jumped up, placed a bed for him by the fire, and spread on it the skins of sheep and goats. Odysseus lay down, and Eumaeus covered him with a great thick cloak, which he kept as a spare garment for exceptionally cold spells. So there Odysseus slept, with the young farmhands beside him. But the swineherd was unwilling to sleep there away from his boars. He got himself ready for a night outside, and Odysseus was delighted to see his diligent concern for his absent master's property. He began by slinging a sharp sword from his sturdy shoulders. He then wrapped himself in a good thick cloak to keep out the wind, picked up the fleece of a full-grown goat, and finally took a sharp javelin with which to ward off dogs and men. And so he went off to pass the night where the white-tusked boars slept, under an overhanging rock, sheltered from the northerly winds.